Hey, this is Corey Barnes.
And this is Lisa Caperton, and you're listening to Her Turn to Talk.
So you went for a run. When was the last time you ran, Corey?
I think, the last time I ran, I know when it was. It was March 13th when this whole pandemic thing started happening, and I just
Were you trying to run from it?
I just ran, and I kept running until I couldn't run anymore. I was running with buckets.
You Forrest Gumped it.
Oh my gosh, I just was like, I had all this energy. I had all this like crazy energy, and that was the last time.
I would have stood outside for you and said, "Run, Corey, run!"
I got this sweet new watch called the Galaxy Watch, and the whole time it talks to you and says like you're doing great, or slow down, or go faster.
Do you have to wear like a heart monitor or anything?
Nope, it has it in it.
Okay, that's cool.
It is cool. And what else did it say to me? Focus on your breathing. And then it was like, focus on your goal. You're doing great.
Do you ever get mad at her?
Impressed. Yeah, there was one time I was like, stop telling me what to do, because she kept telling me to slow down. And then the guy next to me laughed at me because I ran by him. And I said, stop telling me what to do. I was like, oh, he probably thinks I'm yelling at him or I'm some cuckoo bird. Not many masks on the trail today.
There are not many masks in general outside, like even in my neighborhood. Like I just don't see them very often anymore.
If there's a spike, I'm going to take a spike through everybody.
I take mine, and I will say, especially since it's been getting warmer, I'll kind of pull it down on my chin so I can breathe. And then if I see anybody, I quickly pull it up and make sure to put it up before they come around.
I started doing that when I'm riding my bike.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen much more bike riders than walkers or runners, which is interesting because they're the fastest people that go past you, but they're the ones that are being the most compliant with things. I don't know.
TP and paper products are back.
They are back, and I never had the issue. Because every time I went to Costco, they always had it.
Really?
So we still have some. Like I haven't bought any.
I never ran out, but my store, my Louisville King Supers, the aisle has been empty for like a month.
Have you seen the meme? I think I might have sent it to you about the bees preparing for the murder hornets, and they're like carrying in to their hive like little toilet paper and hand sanitizers back to the hive.
No.
Yeah, what? I'll have to find the meme.
Why is everybody talking about these bees? I mean, these murder bees.
The murder hornets, because they kill honeybees, and so they can destroy honeybee hives and stuff. And so that's obviously a big deal for us, which I guess apparently they can kill people too, but it's, not very likely. But they are supposed to be, a much more painful sting than honeybees. But this morning, Danny and I watched a video where they have found now that the honeybees are able to fight back when it's just like a solo hornet comes to them. And we watched the video. Corey, it's fucking crazy. They lure in the hornet to come inside their little hive. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as it grabs a hold of one of the bees, all of the bees surround it and they start vibrating. And it creates such an intense vibration that it heats up. And apparently the honeybees can handle like 2 or 3 degrees hotter temperatures than the hornets can. So really? They overheat, and they basically fry the hornet and cook it with their vibration of all of them around it. Yeah, there's a video you can watch them too.
That's real interesting.
Hi, Bethany.
Hey,
Hello.
Bethany.
How are you?
Thank you so much for coming.
Of course. I'm so excited.
No, we are too.
Bethany, we're just talking about murder hornets and honeybee.
I mean, for real. So yesterday we were sitting on our back porch and this giant fly flew by me, and I was like, this is it. It's a hornet. It's a murder hornet. It wasn't a fly. It was fine. But I was sure.
my
I
God.
love your beautiful library behind you.
Thank you. One of my dreams when I was a kid was to have the Beauty and the Beast library. And luckily I found a roommate, soulmate that had the same desire, I guess. So yeah, we have this great library.
That's great.
Oh, that's so fun. You need one of those rolling ladders so you can hang and sing as you go past it.
You get me. You get me. That's exactly what I want.
So how you been hanging in there? How's quarantine life?
Quarantine life is good. It's I have a daughter, she's 7, and I think our biggest challenge overall is that she's an only child and she's just desperately lonely for kids. And everything that we have tried to do to kind of fill that gap, playing Barbies and just the stuff that you do, it's not the same. We can't fill that need. So I would say that is my biggest challenge. I've actually really enjoyed watching everything, like people come together, and it's just been, I think, really beautiful. Social media, I think, has been really beautiful. Not to get like political, but there's that case that just popped up everywhere about the man who had been running and was shot, and then just it just immediately turn around, everybody addressed it, and now they've been arrested, and I think that is beautiful. That is so beautiful. Yeah. So there are hard things, but there are good things, but the good things are really good.
Yeah. Have you been doing homeschooling yourself, or have you been doing have you been doing any arts and crafts or anything, any self-care stuff?
Yes, self-care has been vital, I think, truly vital. I keep a very detailed planner, and my worst week of quarantine was the week I did the least amount of yoga. And so now I'm on like a 14-day streak. I've done yoga every day for 14 days straight. And it's crucial. It is crucial to especially as a mom. At first I was really struggling, thinking I need to be all of these things for my daughter. And luckily I still have my job. That's wonderful, but it is a lot to work from home and homeschool and do all of these things all at the same time. But we're getting through it. The homeschool thing has been a challenge, but they teach themselves. It's kind of crazy. They just sit there with their Chromebooks and they get these assignments. It's like, I could never have done what they're doing now. It's beautiful.
I feel like my kids are starting to I feel like in the beginning it was easier. They were much more independent, but the last couple of weeks I have noticed, and I think it's because the summer is approaching and it's just like they're starting to shut down. This week especially, I have 2 boys and they're both in middle school, 6th and 7th graders. And I was like literally going from one to the other constantly. One day we were like doing schoolwork till like 2, which is a long day for homeschool. But I was like, what is going on? Because they just couldn't like focus. They really needed me to help them. Like we would read the stuff together and like try to stay on track. But I think they just want it to be like they're just mentally done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so exhausting. But today, guys, I saw one of the cutest things. Our elementary school here in our neighborhood, where my kids went to school, they drove by, the whole staff, principal, all the teachers, and they had balloons and signs, and they were like saying, "We miss you" to all of their kids. And they went past our street for like a full minute, honking. And then maybe 20 minutes later, I went for a walk with my dog, and I saw that they were still out. They made their way through every single street, like everywhere in their neighborhood, to make sure that they went by every kid's house. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Teacher Appreciation Week.
Yeah, I saw tons of signs too. They were like, we love our teachers, we miss you, on the sidewalks and driveways and things like that. I was like, oh, it's so sweet.
I love that. See, it's hard. It is really hard, everything that's going on, but there's such beauty in it too, I guess. I don't know. I can't watch the news much. It's
the yoga. Are you sticking with the core power girls?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding? So I haven't done very many of the live classes. It's just what I really have broken this down. I've taken we pay like $109 a month for your membership. So that's 4 or 5. $10 to $15 classes that I can take virtually. So I'm trying to do that. But the other thing I'm trying to do is buy the classes that people have available so that you support them. If they have like a video recording, you support them, and then
I didn't know that
class
existed.
whenever you want.
Oh,
Barry has one. Shaney has a few.
so smart. It's so convenient. That's brilliant for them on the marketing end.
It really isn't. I actually utilize those classes the most because it's somebody that I know, and that comforts me. The CP on demand, I love it. I do it, a lot, obviously. But hearing just my regular yoga teacher's voice is so normalizing. I don't know.
It's like our community. So for our listeners, Bethany and I met through yoga. We have a really beautiful and I'd say tight-knit community. Not cliquey, but we're a bunch of freaks and weirdos, and we're just our own people here, And we have a great yoga community here in Louisville, or they call it the North Denver area. And that's how Bethany and I met. Bethany was at a teacher training that I had already taken, and I was friends with the instructor. And Bethany and I had quite the adventure together. So Bethany, I wanted to bring Bethany on today because she has an amazing story. And she shared her story with me, and I thought, oh my gosh, this needs to be told to the world. And I even suggested that she enter it into Time magazine because I think it is that good of a story. So Bethany, do you want to read the story? Do you want to tell the story candidly? I figured I'd give you the stage for that.
I would. I think I really did it super well in the story. I think I'd probably just prefer to read it.
Wonderful. I think so too.
Okay. My grandma died over 2 years ago on February 16th. We were very similar in personality, but our similarities pushed us apart more than they brought us together. So her death didn't affect me the way you would think a grandmother's death would, or should. We had been closer when I was younger. We used to watch Law and Order and Columbo together, and she'd make me promise not to tell my very religious parents. We liked the darker, creepier genres, and we bonded over them while eating popcorn. My grandma loved popcorn. I remember she always encouraged me to write and said I had a real talent for it. Once, she took a story that I had written and submitted it to a contest being held in her elderly community. I won first place in that contest against dozens of older, more established writers, and I don't think I ever saw her prouder of me than she was that day. I was 13. Life happened, though, and we grew apart steadily soon after. I stopped writing. She was bossy and I was flippant, and we never managed to look down and see that the common ground we were trying to find was the ground we already inhabited. Then one day she died, and that was that, in some sort of sick way. Death is the kind of finality you can depend on, except when you can't. I recently graduated from a yin yoga teaching course, which, unlike any of my prior teaching courses, featured an anatomy lab that would present cadavers to enhance our knowledge of the body. I was really excited about the lab. I talked to everyone about it for weeks, eager to learn everything that I could. When the day approached, I was jittery. Yes, it was interesting. I was also going to be in a room with a dead body, and I didn't know what that would look like for me. I had a lot of emotions. As I was driving to the lab, my dad called out of the blue to tell me that my grandma from 2 years ago actually donated her body to science, but he couldn't remember where, just that it was in the general vicinity of the town I was headed, my hometown. I had about 13 minutes to process this massive load of information before I got to the lab. Ultimately, I decided that it had been 2 years and there was no way she was still around. While the thought lingered in the back of my mind, I mostly brushed it off. By the time I arrived at the lab, I pushed it back so far it was forgotten, and I joined my classmates in preparation. Once we were given the rundown, we suited up in our lab gear and entered the room. There were 2 bodies, one an enormous male and the other a tiny, frail female. Immediately, I started looking at her hands. I knew those hands. But it had been 2 years. But I knew those hands. But it had been 2 years. We couldn't see the faces of either body, but everything else was mostly exposed. Someone in my class asked how old the woman was. months away from her 72nd birthday. Just like my grandma. My heart started to pound. Another student asked what she had died from. Smoker for 50 plus years. Died of COPD nearly 2 years ago exactly. I couldn't breathe very well, but I kept trying to believe it was the surgical mask I was wearing. The lab technician went on to give the female body's medical history. Brain tumor 25 years ago. I was 6 and I remember that. It was the first time I saw my dad cry. Never regained full motion in her left body, so she walked with a limp. She hated her cane. We had to beg her to use it for her own safety. The limp caused her to overcompensate on the right side, and so she had her hip replaced. I remember buying her a book of jokes for that stay at the hospital. At that point, I wasn't trembling. I was quaking. I kept looking at her hands and then back at mine. The lab technician continued with one last thing. She never ate healthy, and the one thing she wanted people to know was to eat healthier. In her last few years, she lived on popcorn, and her diet made all of her complications worse. I seized the table and gasped, then pointed at the technician and told her to meet me in the hallway immediately. There, I asked if the woman on the table was Sharon Roinestad. The color drained from her face, and she whispered that she should have noticed that I had the same unique last name. She hugged and thanked me and sincerely apologized. But because there is no protocol on how to handle this situation, neither of us were very sure what to do after that. We went back into the class, and I took a spot right next to my grandma's left hand. The technician continued to lecture, but I tuned all of that out and focused on her hand. How, after 2 years, it was still here and still noticeably hers. She had the knobbiest knuckles, and I have them too. In a way, I was looking at my future hands. Finally, I reached out and slid my gloved hand into hers. We sat there and held hands like we used to when I was younger. I could feel her forgiveness, and I could feel her love. I could also hear her smoker's laugh singing in my ears as she patted herself on the back for our morbid reintroduction. One she had designed specifically for me, calling back to the many hours we spent watching creepy TV together. I stopped writing years ago. Everyone is a writer. Everyone has a blog or a podcast, and everyone is trying to make it. What story do I have to tell that is any more interesting, relevant, or helpful than what any other writer has to say? In her final act before she departed my life once more, my grandma gave me a story to write, a story to tell, and she made it creepy, just how we both wanted it.
It's so good.
Thank you.
It's so good, and I was there.
So one of the most wild things I think is when you and I were emailing about this, and you said, I saw you grab her hand. And I thought, that was the first time I thought, I wonder what everybody was thinking in the room when I was just...
So
Heidi,
nobody else knew.
No,
Heidi and I, the instructor and I kept looking at each other, and we'd look back, and Heidi was like, something's not right. And she's looking at me. I'm looking at her. Look, we're looking at you, and we're like, let's keep our eye on her because we were worried you were going to faint. So that's what I thought was going on.
I almost fainted at that point. I said I seized and gasped the table and seized. I was truly like.
And I could have never put a bet down on the truth of what the heck was really going on with you in that moment. And I mean, it's still in my brain fresh like yesterday, you know. And I knew Miss Flora before I had been to that cadaver lab. I think
too, yeah.
9 months before, and I met her. I met her. She had just rolled. Well, no, she hadn't rolled in there. She had just. She was all together still, but her story. Her story. I mean, I never stopped. Her Miss Flora is someone who I'll never forget.
Miss Flora.
And she'll never leave my mind. So to have this additional story added to her already this beautiful story, she's one of the reasons I'm planning on donating my own body to the Colorado Learning Center of Human Anatomy.
I think that is really beautiful. That's something I always admired about my grandma, that she did that, but it was like all of these really loose kind of connections in my head, but nothing ever that you would string together until my dad called. And then even then it was just, all right, you're being dramatic. all right, Dad, you're being dramatic. This is never going to happen.
And then after it happened and you told your family, so what was that like? What happened?
I remember, the one thing that I am so grateful for is the technician. So this all happened pretty late at night. I think we left at 9 or 9:30, and the lab technician who had really been with me through this whole experience, she pulled me aside and said, I don't think you should drive home right away. I think you should just spend some time in your car. Like, what you have gone through is big. Spend some time in your car, just ground yourself. I appreciate that. I took maybe 10 or 15 minutes and just sat in my car, just thinking, I don't know. I'm so grateful for those 10 minutes that she told me to take. I spoke to my boyfriend that night, and we mostly were just kind of in stunned silence. Just absolute stunned silence. Kind of trying to process, but more just, was that real? Did that just, are we like both on drugs and we just created this? Like, the next day I told my dad, and it's my dad's mom. I think it's weird that you say that you want to donate your body to science. I really believe that too. And I would have said that even before this experience. Something weird that came out of it was, like, when you donate your body to science, it's just gone. And for your family, you sign a contract and you say, you can have my body for 2 years. Your family doesn't know what happens to you. They don't understand what's being done to you. They don't understand where you are. It's all very ambiguous kind of to them. So my dad had struggled for the past 2 years, not knowing where his mom was, or if they were taking care of her, or
Damn,
there were a bunch of like pervy 15-year-old science kids poking around at her body. And that was a real fear for him.
I didn't imagine. I didn't even think of that.
I never would have thought of that either, but it really affected him. So the relief actually from my dad was what was cool, just to know she's okay. They are taking care of her. I can promise you, she is a queen. She goes in there, she teaches people. Everybody says thank you, and gives a little prayer to her before and after. She loves where she's at. She just loves that. And that brought my dad so much closure that he hadn't experienced. And I that was also a very beautiful thing to do, was just knowing his mom was okay.
How long do they use a body like that for those purposes? Because I feel like 2 years is a very long time.
It is exactly 2 years. You sign a 2-year contract.
Okay.
I went in, my grandma died February 16th of 2018. And I think we went in on like the 11th. I think it was the 11th of February 2020. So it was 5 days until they were going to contact us and tell us, her contract is fulfilled. Let's figure out next steps.
It was that close?
It was by a week, which adds so much more weight to the fact that, think what you want. I kind of have come to terms, for me, processing. I feel like my grandma reached out to me to offer me this forgiveness.
I was just going to ask you, like, did you guys get a chance to have any kind of conversation, to say goodbye, to have a closure to your relationship?
We didn't. It had been a while since we had spoken. Just, I don't know, just don't realize what you have, maybe, or everything you don't. Death is so final, and you always think, oh, I have this conflict, I'll resolve it later. I'll just resolve it later. And then, then my grandma was on her deathbed, and it was like, do I matter enough to you? Is this something that you need to resolve before you die? And I really did have those conversations with myself, and I thought, am I being selfish by saying, here, you have X amount of time left, spend some of it with me? Is this something I need? Is it something she needs? And then she died, and that was, but she came back a few days before she did not have any other opportunities to come back. And that is beautiful.
That's amazing. And I love how you talk about, like, that she gave you the gift of it being in this creepy way. And that's something that you guys bonded over before. And that was, I love that so much.
Can I ask, Bethany, do you consider yourself spiritual? Are you more religious? Do you have any, or nothing at all? Anything?
I would say not religious, very spiritual, but hesitant. And I'm very in tune with the good side of spirits, and I get stuck when we start talking about scary spirits, and that's when I start I don't believe my house is haunted, but I believe this good spirit exists, and then I can't really back myself up. I start to kind of contradict myself.
But this experience, was this a positive energy, positive universe, spiritual kind of experience for you? Do you consider it that way, or was it just a synchronicity, or was it just a coincidence? What is your perspective on that? Or was it just, this is life, c'est la vie? Right?
All of those things have happened in the months since I've experienced it. There was a while where the first bit I just was 100% sure this is my grandma reaching out to me with her forgiveness. I feel good about it. This is what has happened to me. I went through a while where I thought maybe she's trying to haunt me. Maybe I really screwed up and she's giving me this creepy story. And but
you never know.
Well, truly though, and that's I don't know.
You never know.
But I think overall, and as I have processed it, I remember another story that I have. Part of me thinks that my grandma my entire life was trying to give me stories. There was this time I was 13 and she bought me for Valentine's Day a candy thong.
A thong?
Candy thong. What a 13-year-old girl needs. A candy thong.
It's amazing.
But at the time I had a blog, it was called Live Journal. I don't know if you remember Live Journal.
Oh yeah.
I had the blog. I wrote a story about my grandma and this candy underwear she gave me, and all of my friends just lapped it up, loved it. And the more that I've thought about it, the more I can pinpoint all of these weird things my grandma did in my life. And now I really wonder, am I just someday going to write an entire book about my grandma and make it big and be a millionaire? And it's going to be this thing that my grandma has been working on since I was born, and I never put all the pieces together.
Oh my God.
It's wild.
Are you a writer?
I think I am a talented writer. I think I have a talent for writing. I wouldn't call myself a writer because I'm not really actively writing, but that is what I would love to do. I haven't maybe found the way I want to write. I don't know if that makes sense.
Maybe she gave you these two gifts in one, right? This chance to say goodbye and to have some forgiveness and deal with those emotions, but then also give you this story and give you this thought of hey, maybe you should get going because you have all this time right now. We all have all this time. Maybe you just start writing something.
Actually, I had not even considered that. How interesting that this all happened right before we have this massive chunk of nothing to do time.
Yep.
Wow. And so every time the story just is so layered, right? And you can't talk about it without finding another layer. And there is another one that it all happened right before.
So it sounds like your grandma was a bit of an interesting character, huh?
She was colorful. Yes. My grandma, Sherry, or Miss Flora, one of the strongest, I listened to your podcasts. You do the badass woman. And I actually didn't know if I was supposed to come in prepared to have one or if that's just some chit chat that you do sometimes. But if I had to pick one, I would say it was my grandma. She was a single mom in the 60s and 70s before society was set up to be a single mom. She was a single mom of two boys, hooligans. She was this tiny, frail woman. Her sons are both over 6'4", these giant men. And boy, if she didn't wrangle them until the day she died. I mean, they are just in line. She worked at a flower shop and supported them for, till they grew up. And wow. I have so much admiration for that. I've been a single mom. I was a single mom for a spell in my life. And that was a point that we really bonded over, was just being strong and badass, even if the world tells you no, or there's no place for you here. Make your own place.
And she loved murder mysteries and Law and Order.
All of them. Columbo, Murder, She Wrote was a big one. I never got into Murder, She Wrote with her as much, but Law and Order Special Victims Unit, we could binge that for days.
Well, you're such a light, Bethany. The moment I walked into that classroom, I think you definitely were the very first person I spoke to. And I thought, oh, I think we even exchanged numbers within the first 30 minutes, And when you talk about your grandma, that the light shines a little brighter, And it's just such a cool story. Can you think of any other interesting stories like that, like any of these coincidences that have happened before in your life that don't, do or don't involve grandma? Is it something that you feel happens often?
I would say this is unparalleled. Absolutely 100% unparalleled. I think, I don't know if my grandma always said that there are people who have a sixth sense. And she's been telling me this before the Bruce Willis movie came out, like before it was cool to have a sixth sense. She said my dad had it a little. She had it very strong. She said I had it very strong. I maybe see that in my life, but nothing that I could really, that would be as poignant as this is. Going into that class, I signed up to do that teacher training, which started at the very end of January. I signed up to do that in November, and nothing was going wrong in my life, but nothing was going right either. And I just knew I needed something. The first time that I took teacher training, yoga teacher training, it changed my life, and I loved every minute of it. I mean, it's hard. You change. Every part of you changes physically, mentally, emotionally, but it's beautiful on the other side. I took this class with Heidi, our mutual instructor who introduced us, because Heidi, something spiritually about her just connected to me. So, and I felt that, and she felt it. We felt it. I signed up for that class then. I kept telling everybody in my life, something big is coming. Something is coming. And I don't know what it is, but I know I'm breaking down a lot. I know I have to change something. I don't know what it is. As I progressed through the teacher training, I kept feeling it heavier and heavier. And then suddenly I was there that day in the lab, realizing what all the heaviness had been, realizing I've been feeling this. Like, this is what I've been feeling. And I think that's another part that I really like, is that it's almost like my intuitive grandma was whispering to my intuition that she was coming back, coming back. And I felt it. I really liked that part of the story as well.
It's just so cool.
Thank you.
What was it in that moment? So in that moment, I would imagine, and you're saying, I know those hands. And there has to be a moment of, do I run or do I stay? And because surely you didn't have to stay there. Everybody would have understood if you needed to go. What made you decide to stay and continue on with the class?
It's a great question. I guess when somebody reaches out to you from the dead, you stick around. they just did the impossible. You can stay for 5 minutes.
Truly, the impossible. Like, it really is hard to wrap my head around it. Like, if my grandma, like, who I love, right? I'm trying to think of someone who maybe I kind of lost touch with, and then we're backing in. Maybe my grandfather, Yeah, to wrap my head around that would just, I can't to put myself in your shoes. Just like what the heck, like, just what is going on? It's just something else. Do you have any pictures of her?
I do. Oh, I do have some. I can send them to you. I don't have them.
Yeah.
Readily.
Take a picture. And I'll make sure you have my cell phone number.
Yeah.
And we can put a picture of her up on our website.
I have one that I found after all of this happened, where that same arm, that hand that I held, is wrapped around me. And it's just a wild picture, because that's the hand. I've held that hand so many times.
Awesome.
When we walked into that room, I would say I knew before I even looked at the hands, and this is with kind of that hindsight bias, but something hit me so hard when we walked into that room that it almost was that I saw the hands and I was putting these pieces together, but I also was thinking, am I making this up? Like, this is not happening. Am I doing this for attention? Like, is this, and you really ask yourself these things, like, do I even want to tell anybody what's going on? Because no one is ever going to believe me. And I was really happy the way it worked out with the technician, that I marched her into the hallway and said, is that Sharon Roinestad? So that it wasn't like, hey, I think that's my grandma. Can you tell me her name? So that I could make this story. It was like, I know who that is. and the color that just drained from her face as she put all, it was.
And Barb is amazing. That woman, Barb, she is a special woman. And she's the actual founder of that anatomy center. And she's something else. She's actually someone I'd love to have on the show as well.
I was just going to say, you should have her on the show.
Yeah. She's this whole first I was going to say, this was your very first cadaver class as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
My very first one. So to go into a cadaver class for the very first time, just in general, is it can be really nerve-wracking. It can be nerve-wracking. I mean, it's scary. You don't know what to expect. It's an experience, like to be around and like they have it set up in there. We're very respectful, and it's a serious environment. It's like, I remember at my first course, someone was spoken to like, we don't talk like that here, and
just to be clear for like our listeners and for me, people who haven't done this, it's not like you were just sitting there and you have somebody with the sheet on and you hold their, like, you saw inside of the body, right?
Yes, we saw 2 years. There were a lot of decay has happened in 2 years. So there were parts of her that weren't there. But it is a very, you just walk in and there's a body with a sheet over it on a table and you're there.
Yeah. They have candles over in the corner. They usually play some nice music. Where we went, it was in the basement of a funeral home. So, you see all the tools that they prep bodies in general, and the bodies are preserved to the best they can with, all kinds of different chemicals, but with embalming, that kind of stuff. And they actually wrap all the what do you call them? They're when it's detached. The proper word is,
I was looking for that word too.
Not excrement. It's something extorted. I don't know. I can't think of the correct name, but
so like body parts that are no longer attached.
Yes, there's a very nice term for it, and I wish I could use it right now. But it's it will be on a big, long, almost stretcher table, and but there are. I saw, like I said, I saw Flora when she was still all together, all of her together, and we got to explore so much about her, like her knee replacement, right, and
her hip replacement is something we went over in this one.
That was so cool.
Oh, did she have her knee replaced too?
I can't remember.
But the hip, I remember the hip one. One of our students, one of our classmates, nobody knew what was going on as this happened. He was digging around to find her hip replacement, the actual. And I remember I was just sitting there watching him thinking, nobody is going to believe that this happened to me. And also,
I was going to ask you, is that like an outer body experience? If you're like, I just can't imagine what that must feel like to see somebody digging around in your dead grandmother. I don't even know how else to say that, but
that is what happened. Yeah, it was, and it was this man that I respect and I like a lot. And he was doing everything right. He was learning from my grandma's body. She was there to teach. He was there to learn. Everybody was doing everything they were supposed to do, but it was very dark. And I knew that as I was watching it happen. I knew this is a terrifying, creepy thing that I'm watching. I've had some dreams that have been
really
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. I would say that's maybe the most baggage that I got from it. I've had some, and I'll have dreams of somebody that I love very much and watching them kind of limb from limb fall apart.
Really?
And I know what that is. That makes sense to me in my head, but it is unpleasant, probably. It's definitely unpleasant to have those.
But I mean, right? We get that idea that idea was somehow stamped in your psyche, right? Because of that experience.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so interesting. Just the different perspectives, right? Because it's, what a magnificent thing to the anatomy of the human body is just so extraordinary, right? When I went before you, the first time I went, there was a man who had a pacemaker, and we got to see, pulled back the pacemaker and how the body had grown around this pacemaker, and how spectacular that was to learn that the body adapts to whatever, whether it's a prosthesis or a body part making up for, specifically your grandma. Her right leg was much stronger than her left leg because her left leg was the one with the hip replacement. It was always making up for the other side. And just how beautiful the body truly is. And then, oh my God, talk about the uterus. It is tiny. I had no idea how tiny the uterus was. And like, I've got to see that now, and like, it's so spectacular. A heart, to see those things.
The heartstrings. There are actual heartstrings.
Yeah.
You touch somebody's heartstrings, you actually can physically do that. There are strings in the heart. Wild. What?
And when you don't know them, it's one thing, right? I love, I have so much appreciation for this person, but then to know them again, it is just like a totally different dimension and a totally different perspective and experience that, it's just, it's not supposed to happen.
As we were looking at certain parts on the inside, I was thinking like mine comes from her, I am 25% of this woman.
Wow.
And my, this bone that I'm looking at my bone could be exactly like her bone. We talked about looking at the hands. I kept looking at, I have these knuckles that I can see them. And as soon as I saw hers, I was looking at mine thinking, those are my knuckles. Like those, we're looking. I have to say my favorite story of everything that happened that day, all of it, my favorite funny story. Heidi our mutual instructor came to check on me as we moved to the second body, the man. And I had come back into the room. She kind of pulled me aside and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I've just got to tell you, like, that was my grandma." And she goes, "I know, we all feel that way." And then, and then there was this time where I was like, do I clarify or do I just like leave it there?
That's what Heidi said.
She was so nice. I mean, she
would say that.
She was so nice and so comforting. I know we all feel that way. And I was like, no.
Did you clarify?
No. Yeah.
You
well,
didn't?
I didn't, right at that second, I didn't, the whole classroom was moving around. It wasn't like the time to drop a bomb, but later I did tell her, Barb, the technician, and I told her, and we just all kind of discussed it and just how crazy it was. And
do you think, or did you think at all, did it cross your mind, like when all that was going on, like, do you think your grandma would have been happy with what people were learning and what was being, what was happening with her body and what it was able to do for others?
Yes. I think my grandma was a queen in her castle there. She was so safe. Barb, in no way has my grandma's body was ever in danger. And I can tell you that I met Barb. Any like weird thing that my dad was thinking or that was just, Barb loved my grandma, loved her. And that was so obvious. Barb took such good care of my grandma. And I think that my grandma loved that camaraderie they had. I think she probably really liked being taken care of by somebody who so ferociously did take care of her. Barb was so sad that the contract was up. She said, Miss Flora has been my favorite, ever of anybody. We knew each other personally. We had this relationship. I loved her. She loved me. We did all of these things. And so I really think it was the best way to go out for my grandma. You are taken care of by your friend who just watches you so carefully, babies you, takes care of everything. And then every once in a while, you get a slew of folks who come in and learn from you. You teach the world, you educate the world, you offer this experience that is so rare. And people sit there and learn from you. And then after, thank you, and just give, just take a second to say thanks. She's the queen of the room. You walk in and she's the queen of the room, and you learn from her. She steals the show and you thank her and leave. The woman is in heaven.
Yeah. And you never forget her.
What will happen to Miss Flora now? Where does she go?
Miss Flora was cremated. She went with my uncle's side of the family, although I was really, I don't know, I didn't push for it too hard because it wasn't really my place, but I wanted Barb to have some of my grandma. Barb has this bench that she's, their whole organization, Barb and her organization have built this bench, and it overlooks this beautiful view in Longmont. And it's all of those bodies that go through that institution, they spend time together, and it would be nice just to have a little bit of my grandma's ashes there. So I tried to make that work. I don't know if they'll take me up on it or not, but for now she has been cremated. She's with my uncle.
Oh, I hope it happens.
I think that would be so beautiful.
It would.
Sit there with her friends all the time.
Absolutely.
Have you had any thoughts about wanting to do that yourself, or you're like, I don't know?
I absolutely want to do that myself. My hindrance would be that I would want to talk to my daughter about it and say, here's something that your grandpa struggled with when my grandma did this. Can we talk about it? Is this something that would be okay with you? It would be so good. I would love to do it. But if it's going to put you in a weird place for 2 years, you sort of have to weigh that.
Yeah.
Again, I never would have considered, though, that there would be that kind of uncertainty or unsettling in a family member for that. But I guess it makes sense. I can see it.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. But yes,
Nice.
donate your body. Donate your organs.
I'm on the donor list right here. I'm like, take it all.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
I'm not doing anything with it at that point.
Well, Bethany, this has been wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me, with Lisa, and now all of our listeners. It's out. It is out and about.
Thank you.
Is just
yes.
so wonderful. And you're so talented, and we look forward to more stories from you. And I'd love to keep having you on as you write your stories and any way that we can support you. Thank you.
What an honor, and ditto. Any way I can support you.
Yeah, thank you. No, that was an honor to hear that story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
And if anyone wants to reach out to you to say, hey, I loved your story, or just wants to reach out, where can they contact you?
I am on Instagram at Bethany Roinestad. I follow the podcast, so look for a Bethany R and you'll find the rest. It'll all fall into place.